Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a fascinating historical puzzle. We're talking about ancient documents that seem to describe specific events in incredible detail hundreds of years before they ever happened. We're going to treat this like a cold case file, just examining the evidence and following it wherever it leads.
Okay, so let's jump right in. In 1947, we get this incredible archaeological find, the Dead Sea Scrolls. And among them is a complete copy of the Book of Isaiah, and scientists date it to about 125 BC. Now, this is a huge deal. It completely blows up any argument that these prophecies were written after the events. It proves without any doubt that the text we're about to look at was locked in and unchanged for over a century before Jesus was even born. It's like a hard, undeniable timestamp on the evidence.
So that brings us to one specific chapter, Isaiah 53. It was written 700 years before the fact, and it describes this mysterious figure called the suffering servant. For this explainer, we're going to approach this like a forensic investigation, comparing the details in this ancient document directly with the historical record.
All right, here's our first piece of evidence, pulled straight from that 700-year-old scroll. It predicts that this servant figure would be totally silent when facing his accusers, even as he was being led to his death. And when you put the two side by side, you see this direct, one-to-one match. Historical accounts written decades later describe Jesus acting in this exact, really unusual way. Think about it for a second. His silence was so out of the ordinary that it actually shocked the Roman governor. This isn't some vague similarity. It's a precise match to a specific behavior predicted 7 centuries earlier.
Okay, next up, Isaiah makes this really strange and very specific prediction about the servant's burial. And it sounds like a contradiction, right? He'd be assigned a grave with criminals, but would end up buried with a rich man. How could both be true?
Well, this detail turns out to be crucial. Normally, a crucified criminal in the Roman Empire was just thrown into a common grave. No ceremony, nothing. But the historical record shows that Jesus was buried in a brand new tomb owned by a wealthy, high-ranking council member. It's a highly unlikely event that just happens to perfectly match Isaiah's very specific prophecy.
And this is where it gets incredibly precise, especially when you dig into the original language. When Isaiah says the servant was wounded, the original Hebrew word is halal. Now, this doesn't just mean hurt or injured. It specifically means to be pierced through, a fatal wound that penetrates all the way. It's almost like a clinical description of death by crucifixion, written centuries before that practice was even common.
But believe it or not, the evidence doesn't stop there. Now we're going to jump even further back in time, to a text written by King David 1,000 years before the crucifixion. We're talking about Psalm 22. So Jesus shouts these exact words from the cross. But this wasn't just a cry of despair. You see, in first-century Jewish practice, quoting the first line of a psalm was like naming a psalm. It was a way to bring the entire psalm to mind for everyone who could hear. He was basically saying, pay attention, this whole thing, it's about what's happening to me right now.
And just look at the level of detail here. The psalm describes the physical sensation of your joints being pulled apart under your own body weight on a cross. And then it even records this small specific detail, the soldier's gambling for his tunic. These are things that line up exactly with the historical accounts.
But maybe the most stunning verse in this whole ancient psalm is this one right here. It's simple, it's brutal, and it's an unbelievably specific description of an execution. Yeah, let that sink in for a minute. King David described death by having your hands and feet pierced a full 1,000 years before the Persians or the Romans ever developed it as a method of execution. At the time he wrote this, it didn't even exist. So the question is just, how? How could he possibly have known that?
And this wasn't just a one-off thing. Other prophets, writing at different times all throughout history, added more of these unique fingerprints to the profile of this coming figure. It's like they were building a mosaic of details over the centuries.
What's so crucial here is how these fingerprints build this incredibly consistent and detailed picture over hundreds of years. One prophet names the exact tiny town where he'll be born. Another describes him coming into the capital city on a specific animal. Another one predicts the precise amount of betrayal money and even what that money would be used to buy. Each detail, from a different source, from a different century, adds to this one single coherent profile.
So all of this brings us to the central question of our whole investigation. What are the odds? What is the actual mathematical probability that just one person could fulfill all of these specific ancient predictions purely by random chance?
Well, mathematicians have actually calculated the probability of just 8 of these prophecies being fulfilled by chance in one person. The odds?
1 in 100 quadrillion. That is a 1 followed by 17 zeros.
To even try to wrap our heads around that number, picture this, covering the entire state of Texas, 2 feet deep in silver dollars. The odds of just 8 of these prophecies coming true for one person by chance is the same as blindfolding someone, sending them out into that sea of coins, and having them pick out one specific, marked coin on their very first try. I mean, for all practical purposes, it's a statistical impossibility. So, if it's not a coincidence, what is it?
You know, this isn't just about solving some ancient riddle or a historical fun fact. The source material argues that this impossible level of detail actually has profound implications for every single one of us today. Jesus himself saw his life and death not as some horrible tragedy, but as the fulfillment of a story that had been written down in these ancient texts for centuries. He was explicitly claiming that all of this was part of a deliberate, pre-written plan. And this really is the ultimate conclusion that the source material presents. The evidence of prophecy isn't just offered as proof about the past. It's framed as a reason to have real confidence about the future. The core argument is this: if history could be guided with such impossible precision over 1,000 years, then maybe, just maybe, the details of our own lives aren't just random chance either.
The sheer precision of these prophecies suggests that the events of the cross were not an accident, but a plan. And the source material concludes that this plan wasn't rooted in chance, but in love. So it leaves us with this final question to think about. If this wasn't just luck, but a meticulously planned act of love, told for centuries, what does that mean for how you can face whatever comes next?